City of Stevens Point Public Policy and General Government Meeting, recorded August 10, 2020.
Next up is Public Policy and General Government, and Alder Jennings, Chair Jennings, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to call the August 10th Public Policy and General Government meeting to order. I see that we have present Alder Kneebone, Alder Fischler, Alder Leek, Alder Nabel, and myself. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda is the license list. Item number C has been pulled. I would like to, Mayor, your mic is, thank you. I'd like to take A and B individually because I know that we have a person who would like to speak on B, or letter B. First one is a temporary Class B license for picnic at Pacelli Catholic Schools. Chief Zinner, any concerns or comments about this?
No issues.
Any questions, concerns from the committee? I see none. Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the committee. What are your wishes?
Alder Nabel here. District 3, I would like to move to approve the temporary Class B for the Pacelli Catholic Schools picnic license.
Do we have a second?
Leak here, I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. If there are, excuse me, no further comments, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Alder Jennings, I hate to interrupt. I have a constituent has called me on my home phone. They're trying to get into the meeting, but they're not able to log in. What should I? There's no one from that location that can log into the Zoom. They can't get in. They're not able to log in through Zoom. Should we have them call the phone number?
So Alder Kneebone, what is the issue? Do you know?
They are trying to log in to participate into the meeting, but they're not able to log in through Zoom. So I'm trying to.
They're not able to log in. Why? Is it giving them an error, or do they not have a good internet connection?
They're on my home phone. I'm not sure. Hold on.
So they can use the phone number and call in as well. You don't need to connect through the Zoom virtual meeting here. The phone number should be listed on the agenda. If you want to give it to them again, it's 312.
It's, do you have a pencil? I'm very sorry about this. Hold on. I'm going to mute myself and then I'll come right back. Yes.
You have the connection information, Alder Kneebone? Good. She's nodding yes. Sorry, Chair Jennings.
All right, we will proceed to item number B. Again, C has been pulled. Item number B is extension of license premise for Point After at 801 2nd Street.
Alder Jennings,
yes.
I believe you have it backwards. Point After pulled their request. Rookies, I do not believe did.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. So we are, B then was pulled, and we're going to see extension of license premise for Rookies Sports Pub, 3425 Church Street. Chief Zinner.
No issues.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Keely Fischler. I just had a question. This is just through October, correct? No?
That is not correct. The extension of premise would be in perpetuity. We did allow the alcohol open intoxicants downtown for a certain period of time, but this is an extension of premise, so it would be granted forever.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Questions? Go ahead.
Cindy Nabel here. I'm not quite sure then. I didn't realize this was for ever and ever to have an outdoor license. So this is at Rookies, and that is on Church Street. And is that the one that I'm just trying to figure out where that is located?
Alder, it's the Blue Top building. Most people know of it as the old Blue Top.
Okay.
Down by the Knights Inn motel. Does that help?
It does. And is it going to be in the back of the place that they're looking at for having it open?
Chair Jennings, I'll leave that to you. That information was included in the packet.
I know, I'm trying to just figure out where this is at.
And what I'll say is that I'll just remind everybody that extension of premise is something that existed prior to COVID-19. And so this is not an unusual request.
Alder. Jennings, this is Director Karnowski. Just to clarify this, in order to get an extension of premise, they also need to get a conditional use permit through the Plan Commission and City Council. Whenever you extend the boundaries of the conditional use, i.e. having alcohol consumption outside of the physical property, that is a zoning thing, just to throw that out there, that while they will be approved for this tonight and goes to council, they will have to come back through the Plan Commission process. We're working with the owners of Rookies currently to go through that process.
Any comments from the public?
So again, Alder Nabel, I would like to ask them, so from what I'm seeing in the drawing, that is behind or off to the side of the front of Rookies, that they're looking at having that open area.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see no comments from the public. Bringing it back to the committee, what are your wishes, please?
This is Keely Fischler. I would move to approve the, I would move to approve. Thanks.
Thank you. Motion to approve the extension of license premise. Do we have a second?
Alder Kneebone seconds.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Agenda item number 3 is overnight street parking. There was a letter from Alder Kneebone in the packet. This item comes forward from both Alder Kneebone and Alder Dalton. I would like to ask both Alder Kneebone and Alder Dalton to address this agenda item since it was your request. And then I would also like to ask Chief Zinner, Director Badoon, and Director Konofsky to comment on this. I do have a comment that I want to say about this because we do have new alders as well. And I just would like to refresh everyone's memory on overnight parking. So since June 10th, 2019, overnight parking has been debated in committee 5 times. So this is number 6. The Board of Public Works on June 10th, 2019, there was a request by Alder Dalton regarding fee payment and structure of overnight parking. Board of Public Works on July 8th, there was a discussion to accept ordinance amendment to section 9.05 regarding parking. August 12th, Board of Public Works, an ordinance amendment was brought forward by Alder Dalton and no action was taken on that. On October 14th, 2019, an ordinance amendment was brought forward by staff regarding overnight parking. section 9.05. That motion did pass. On March 9th, 2020, Alder Dalton brought forward an amendment to section 9.05 related to parking permits. Director Badoon stated that staff did not have time to review the text of that proposal, and Chief Zenner stated at that meeting he was opposed to having more vehicles parked on the street. The agenda item was sent back to staff. There was a discussion in there. I haven't been able to identify via video exactly when it happened, but there was a discussion amongst council members and staff that I was using the term parking authority. I want to be clear, that's a placeholder term, that we have no such thing. But the idea was members of staff from the different departments would come together and address concerns brought forward by staff. They would come back to committee with a recommendation. I did state to Alder Kneebone that I felt like this agenda item was circumventing the process that we had in place. Nonetheless, it's certainly appropriate for alders to bring forward agenda items, and so you see that before you now. So Alder Kneebone or Alder Dalton, if you would like to begin, please, and then we will move to staff.
Thank you, Alder Jennings, Chair Jennings, for the consideration. I know that we have had this discussion, and yet we still have people, residents, who pay a lot of property taxes, who are being forced to pay even more to park on the street because their lot isn't big enough to accommodate the cars in the household. It seems to me, if we don't want to go to free overnight parking, we should at least have some kind of a process by which these folks can appeal for a free permit to park alternate side without having to pay. Even $1 a night can be a hardship, especially in this time when a lot of people aren't working. They still have 2 cars and they're still being forced to pay. If nothing else, maybe suspended at least for 2 or 3 months until we can get a parking authority. There needs to be a way for people to appeal for regress of grievances. Let me put it that way. Alder Dalton, I'll let you add what you'd like to add.
Thanks, Alder Kneebone. Alder Dalton here. Yeah, though the item has been brought forward in the past, I guess I felt like there was some call for a change in the current system that we have. And Alder Kneebone brought forward a new case study from within her boundaries, and we talked about that this could be an opportunity to really just light a fire under this issue in order to come to some conclusion. If not to have the free overnight parking, but to have some sort of compromise, because as we discussed in the past, that the current system that we operate under is extremely regressive and disproportionately affects people of lower incomes a substantial amount. And those people are often the ones that live in rental properties and have a tighter neighborhood pattern, and so just might be in the need to use the streets that are a part of our community infrastructure for parking. I would also like to state that Alder Johnson was a part of bringing forward the previous discussions, and I appreciate that the staff has taken some time to put together a reduction. But I would like to reiterate, as has been discussed in the past, that even coming out of the 2017 housing study, one of the recommendations that was made was that free alternate side parking be implemented in the city in order to address some of the use of property and just physical property space as parking lots. And while I can appreciate that there would be some alterations in public works operations, there are a lot of communities that operate with a free alternate side park and still are able to clear their streets and maintain their streets as necessary. And I think when we're talking about the cost I think that there is obvious when you talk about the cost of providing the service, obviously enforcement costs something. And so if you're operating in a system that doesn't have the same level of enforcement that our police department could use just a visual inspection to determine whether cars are properly parked or not, that would be a significant reduction into the time and labor that they spend enforcing, and may allow them and may free up their personnel to do and deal with more substantial issues that our community is asking them to serve and deal with, rather than ones that a lot of people are not clamoring to be dealt with, which is whether or not that they park on the street overnight. So I look forward to a robust discussion from the committee. Thanks.
Alder Nabel here, District 3. May I make a comment or two?
Alderman Abel, would you mind if we go through staff first?
Sure.
And then have committee members speak, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you. Chief Center, if you could address this, and also if you could talk about some of the gaps that have not been addressed in any kind of change to the current parking ordinance that we have, in particular, defining a downtown district or restricting parking downtown, some of those issues that have not been addressed by staff, and also perhaps an increasing parking violations to deal with some of the budget shortfall. But anything you can add, please go ahead.
Sure. As I've stated on previous occasions that this has come up in general, the police department is not in support of more vehicles being parked on the roadway. In particular at night, many of the locations that we're talking about, not only are they single family houses, small garage, certainly understand the aspect that the parking may not be allowed in or have the space to park that in the driveways or on the garage. We also are dealing with narrower streets in these locations too. So when we park more vehicles on the roadway, obviously that narrows the streets. If we went down this path of free, and I know we looked at a negotiated, I would say best negotiated with department heads and staff, some changes to permits, looking at daily, monthly, and yearly. Two things I would bring up. One, if we even went down to this, we're going to have more vehicles parked on the streets. And if we went to a free one, obviously we would too. My recommendation would be then to raise the parking violation citation currently at $15, possibly up to $25, if not more. It's going to be more imperative that we not have vehicles in violation if we're going to have more vehicles parked on one side of the street. We have violations. It's one, either a higher citation or requiring to toll, in particular some streets on the north side that are very narrow, that would be a serious traffic hazard. The other issue I'd bring up is in the downtown area. This is an area where we get the most overnight parking complaints. Obviously, we got farmers market in the summertime, very narrow roadways that need to be plowed and cleared. Main Street, regardless of how you want to address that, if you have vehicles parked on one side of the street, and I could let Scott Benoon talk about that more in general, but that would be a location, a clear definition or defined boundaries of the downtown district that I would highly recommend we not allow any overnight parking. We do have parking lots, obviously, down there, and we would need to address that. Had some brief conversations earlier today, even looking at the proposed monthly fee of $20 for a parking pass. We're currently charging $25 monthly to park in a parking lot downtown. I'm certainly not going to pay $25 to park in a parking lot when I can pay $20 to park anywhere on the street that I want. So certainly some things that we would need to look at moving forward. I guess that'd be the starting point that I would address.
Thank you, Chief. Director Badoon, could you talk about the impact on other operations, and anything else you'd like to add to this conversation. Director, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Mayor, he is unmuted. Do you have any suggestions here?
So here's what I would do, Scott. Director, I'm sorry. Next to the mute button, you see an option to test speaker and microphone. If you click on that, the little up arrow. Are you on your phone or a laptop? I'm going to try and read your lips. Phone. Okay. So maybe the volume on your phone, perhaps? Do you have the mute button on your phone? Because your phone has its own mute. Doesn't look like it. All right, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to try this. It worked once. Let's try it again. I'm going to call Director Badoon on my phone.
All right, now can everybody hear me?
Yes, they can hear you now.
Not very well, but we can hear you, so.
Yeah, there's not much I can do about that. We're kind of really rigging this up.
Here. All right, so if everyone can hear me, hopefully you can.
Director, I would not worry about the video. Put the phone up to your mouth.
At least as we see it from Public Works, really it's the same arguments as stuff or statements you've otherwise said before. Not that we know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but to know that, if we can all assume that there's going to be some increase in the amount of parking activity, on the city streets, and it really becomes, if we're going to start to do that for free, is the fact that, we do realize that there will be more effort involved for us to continue to keep those streets clean. In the summer months during sweeping, it's probably minimal and just some additional planning and processing on our end to ensure that we work with the ultimate street. In the wintertime, however, we don't really know what that might be. Over the years, we've averaged about 27 events a year, or time of day, duration that happens. But most of our cleanup activities and such that we do have to come and do for at nighttime. We have shifts on at night trying to take care of those. We're definitely going to have to try to work harder with that, and most likely see, at the very minimum, talking with superintendents today, try to hash out some of the numbers. It could be a relatively small amount, but assuming we would require to have at least one individual to follow up on those, to keep things otherwise clean to a extent to where people are accustomed to what we've provided in the past, we'd be looking at an additional $6,500 just in the labor hours to try to cover that cost. Of course, every winter is different. We can't otherwise identify what that'll be until it happens. But it just identifies our thought process that there will be additional costs for us to do that and use those individuals to accomplish other things to get there. And then we're going to try to do that for free when we're already tight. Even in the winter months, we still try to utilize our staff as best we can to accomplish things like spring and summer. And if we need to utilize them more so in that role, is going to have an impact. So that's really where we're coming from. If we need to get out there and do things, we certainly will do them. We're not going to neglect the streets in there and not do the cleanup as necessary as best we can. But that's really becomes our concern. Again, because we can't predict what they have and what the weather exactly is going to be like, that's just assuming things work normally. If we get some of those precipitation events that followed by a hard freeze, that could create some additional things where we need to get out graders and heavier equipment to try to clear the point adequately, of course, additional costs to do that. But definitely there will be some additional effort on our part in order to ensure we keep the roads clean to a point comparable to what people have come to expect from us today.
Thank you, Director. Director Konofsky, if you could weigh in from your perspective.
Sure. I hope everybody can hear me. So just from the pure community development land use standpoint, the city's direction and what I think attracted me to this position itself is this refocus on core redevelopment and density, and something that I think this council takes a great pride in is some of the redevelopment efforts that we've gone through. What comes with that redevelopment of the city's core and these smaller lots and higher density is exactly what we're dealing with now. The example that was brought up in Alder Kneebone's district was we have a property owner who has a townhome that has 6 units in it that's on 1/3 of an acre. They're pretty limited in what they can do to expand the parking in that area itself. Now, if we look and we talk a lot about property tax revenue and everything else, the property tax revenue for all taxing jurisdictions for that 6-unit property on that 1/3 of an acre parcel is roughly $6,300 a year. Adjacent to it is a property, it's a single family that's also on 1/3 of an acre. They bring in about $2,800 a year. So why I'm bringing this up is if you want to have higher density on smaller lots, that this is something that we've got to take into consideration, is that we might have to go into the on-street parking conversation a little further, because that's the direction that the council's been pushing the city. As I talked to some of the other alders is, everything in community development and municipal government is a tugging and pulling of all different strings, and it all works together somehow, some way. And this is just one of the ways that we're seeing some policy decisions that this council has made over the last several years start to come into full effect. When we were talking about this kind of internally as staff, we discussed the North Side Yard project. It's underparked. It was something that was attractive to the city. But we have a pretty significant financial stake in that project, and so it's important for it to be successful. If you have a development that's underparked and that's going to deter tenants from going into that property, are we going to run into issues with especially the financial stake that the city has for that specific development? Have we already, quote unquote, made the bed? We just need to lay in it now because we've already underparked a significant development in our downtown area. The neighborhood, especially on the north side in the 1st and 4th districts, are going to be impacted. There will be a further conversation, if not this year, next year, or the year after, about on-street parking, especially in the north neighborhood, because of that specific development. So again, my perspective is, if you're going down one route, this is one of those items that you have to address with it, is the on-street parking conversation, and knowing that the higher density you have, the less likelihood you're going to have of ability to park cars off the street in a specific property. So from community development, that's what I have on this one.
Thank you very much. So what we've heard are 3 very different perspectives, or different perspectives on the same issue. And it illustrates sort of the complexity of parking, and also that there's competing interests related to it. Comptroller Treasurer Laddick, do you wish to weigh in now or later on? Because there's a financial component of this.
Sure, I'd be happy to weigh in. And of course, there is a financial component from a couple of different angles. One, of course, is the revenue that we're currently getting, and that would be impacted. The other way to look at it is, there's also a cost to provide that service. There can be an extra cost for the Public Works Department to have to do certain things, and that needs to be considered. There can also be additional costs if we're in a position where now streets have to be wider and we need to have wider pavement in order to accommodate parking. There's also a very significant cost there. So one of the things that I would say about the proposal that was put forward, which was intended to sort of be a compromise, we've certainly talked about this a number of times, as was noted. So the thought was to get another option on the table, sort of a compromise option, and the dollar amounts, especially that $200 a year yearly fee, we do feel that is in the ballpark of what it does cost the city for parking, and it also is in the ballpark of what it would cost a private developer to have off-street parking in terms of an off-street parking lot. Certainly when you talk about the cost of paving that lot and installing it, and you talk about the cost of plowing it and the seal coating and the restriping and everything else that goes into it. So the proposal that's on the table, we do feel that it's fair. The $3 a night, I will admit that probably was maybe a little bit more on the side of keeping overnight parking fairly restricted. If we look at the proposal that's put forward, this is really more to be in line with the costs of the service and also to be in line with the costs of alternatives. So that, for instance, the case study with the apartment building on Dixon Street, you know, if they were going to install their own parking and you depreciate the parking lot over the course of so many years and so on and so forth, it should be around the same cost. So hopefully there's sort of some middle ground here as far as to be able to say, okay, you know, if we're just looking to cover the cost of providing a service and the cost of alternatives, you know, hopefully that's not too unreasonable, I guess.
Thank you very much. I just want to warn everybody at 6:45, the mayor is going to need to recess council or begin and then recess council meeting because something is coming up. We will, go ahead.
If I could interrupt and offer a suggestion, because we have two relatively, what I believe to be relatively simple items in 4 and 5, one of those is actually on our council agenda. If you could suspend discussion on this item, move to item number 4, get a consideration of that one. And by that time, we should be able to hold the council meeting and we can take up a more in-depth discussion without interruptions after that, if that's acceptable.
Certainly. Do we need to make a motion for that or can we just agree?
Nope, that would be a discretion of the chair, provided none of the committee members object.
If no one objects, we will suspend this discussion. Seeing no objections, we will move to item number 4. This is the ordinance amendment, section 16.12. This is to temporarily waive sidewalk cafe vending equipment removal requirements. I do want to emphasize this is temporary and in response to COVID-19. Chief Zinner, do you have any comments about this?
The only concern I would have is the potential of this finding its way in the center of Main Street at about 3 in the morning. Whether there would be a potential way of securing such a, you know, maybe bringing the chairs in at least, you know, heavier items, I guess would not be an issue, but I do have some reservations on the smaller items finding their way into a window or relocated into a traffic hazard.
I'm wondering if we could perhaps amend this so that they have to cable the equipment together, or as you suggest, maybe bring in just the chairs. That's a potential consideration here. Bring it back to committee, please. Alderman Abel, you're muted.
Excuse me. Thank you. Alderman Abel here, District 3. I just know from past experiences with my son working at Taco Bell in the past, people steal the chairs right out of the building after they're out there drinking and then eating. So I think it's a real important to think about this, that maybe after a certain time period, 10 o'clock, these items are taken in.
President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm the one who brought this forward after speaking with a number of downtown businesses that do have outdoor seating and the challenge of, taking in the stuff. I know I certainly wouldn't want to do it if I owned a food establishment downtown. In speaking with them again, I asked about securing it. What I heard from the business owners were, we have no problem with that because we decided to buy this. We don't want to have to buy this stuff again. So they are absolutely fine with securing and cabling things because they don't want their investment in the street either. So if that is the wish of the committee, I think that's perfectly fine. This is really about, we're all eating outdoors. I do not eat inside except at my home. And this is just one more way to provide some convenience for folks who need to be away from home once in a while before they go stir crazy, and to also accommodate our businesses downtown with one other option and make it a little more convenient. So thank you.
Alder Jennings, I have a comment. Alder Kneebone here. All the years I worked at Starbucks and cabled up tables and chairs on the patio, we never ever had a problem. So I think I agree with what President Johnson said. The businesses are going to want to protect their equipment. So if everything's secure, I don't think it should be an issue.
Any other comments from the committee? Alder Nabel, you're muted.
Thought I hit unmute. I'm sorry. Is there going to be a specific time when these items will be cabled then and secured?
That is not written into the language. So if that's something you want added, you need to suggest that. President Johnson, since I think you had a hand in this, would you like to address that?
Sure. I think it's reasonable to, if I was on the committee, I would make a motion to amend the ordinance or the resolution, the policy change, to add that the tables and chairs should be cabled or secured by at least 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. Excuse me.
Good. And I'd like to make a motion then, if it's all right, to approve the ordinance amendment with the addition of requiring the temporarily waived sidewalk cafe vending equipment to be cabled by 10 p.m.
This is Alder Fischler. I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have not received, I do want to make sure the public has an opportunity to speak. Anybody from the public have any comments on this?
Bob Weir, 727 2nd Street. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
As Bob Weir, 727 2nd Street. This is another example of one of these last-minute decisions being made without any homework being done. The current ordinance regarding sidewalk cafes require that they stop operation at 11 p.m. When this was discussed previously, the only item that was on the agenda, as I recall, was removing the fencing around the sidewalk cafes. And then a comment or a request came in from someone, one of the property or one of the business owners downtown, stating that they had forgotten to put in a request about keeping the furniture on the street. And all of a sudden, then the decision was made without proper notice to the public and without any forethought, I don't believe, by the council members. To that's a good idea. They can leave the tables and chairs on the sidewalk. What I would encourage the council to do is do their homework before they start making decisions. Now you have a recommendation for a 9 o'clock cabling and a motion to cable at 10 o'clock. How does a legally operated sidewalk cafe operate until 11 o'clock with their tables and chairs all chained together? That's my comment for now. Thank you.
Chair Jennings, I apologize. I have to stop you there. First of all, I want to address the comment that Mr. Ware made. Everything we've done has been legally, publicly noticed. And in most cases, we have exceeded the legal requirements of that notice. But I do need to stop you here and call the council meeting to order. I apologize. I thought we could have been over with this ahead of time, but I apparently added more confusion. So I'm going to call the council meeting to order. Then I'm going to recess the council meeting until such time as this committee has completed all of its actions. Chair Jennings, I need you to recess the public policy and general government meeting, please.
Sorry, you're going to need to coach me in the language of this thing.
All you have to say is we stand in recess until such time as the council meeting is, well, just stand in recess. That's all you need to do.
All right, thank you. We stand in recess.
Alder Jennings, all you need to do now is call the meeting back to order and continue your discussion.
All right, I call the Public Policy and General Government meeting to order. We have a motion and a second to accept the ordinance amendment regarding section 16.12 temporarily waive sidewalk cafe vending equipment removal requirements with the amendment that items will be cabled or secured by at least 10 o'clock p.m. That is the motion and a second. Do we have any other? Mayor Wiesa, please.
Because our current cafe sidewalk ordinance does go until 11 p.m., I would strongly urge the committee to edit the time restriction and make it 11 o'clock to be concurrent with our current ordinance.
Yeah.
Alder Nabel here. I would like to change my amendment to the acceptance of the ordinance to 11 p.m. rather than 10 p.m.
This is Alder Fischler. I would second that.
Okay, very good. Any other comments from the committee or questions before we move to the public?
Alder Jennings, I have a quick question. I think it was in the agenda, but refresh my mind. When does this end? Is this November 1st or October? Okay, thank you.
Comments from the public? Any further comments? Mr. Ware, I see you again.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mute.
Thank you.
Alder
Comments
Shore
from the public?
Did you catch that, Chair Jennings? Alder Shore has his hand up.
Please go ahead, Alder Shore.
Actually, no, that was for the parking discussion. So I would like to be recognized when we return to that item. Thank you.
All right, we'll bring it back to the committee. We have a motion and a second. We've amended the time to 11 o'clock p.m. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. We will continue with agenda item 5 and then return to number 3, overnight street parking. Amendment number 5 is the ordinance amendment section 2.28 Public Protection Committee renamed to Public Policy and General Government. This is in your packet. This is the basically the revision of the language of the amendment itself. Are there any concerns, questions, comments? Any questions, comments from the public? We'll bring it back to committee. What are your wishes?
Alder Nabel here. I wish to move approval for the change of the name for public protection to the new name of Public Policy and General Government.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
It's Alder Fischler. I'll second that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, we return to item number 3, overnight street parking. We had heard from directors, from Chief Zinner, from Director Badun, Director Konoski, and also our Comptroller Treasurer. What we see are different perspectives of the same issue and different kind of impacts on these different operations. We'll bring it back to committee. Any further comments or questions from the committee? Please address the director or chief that you're speaking to, please.
Cindy Nabel, District 3. I'm just speaking in general. I would like to list a few reasons of why this did not pass the many times prior to this Public Works Committee and why it should not be passed again. Past city clerk back in August of 2019, Paul Piotrowski, confirmed that it was a nightmare when it was allowed in the past for parking, especially in the winter. People took advantage in parking everything, including motorhomes, boats, trailers, etc., on the street. This would be providing cheap or free on-street parking only encourages more vehicles that will leak oil, find cigarette butts, more litter into our neighborhoods and sewers. My concern is that we've been looking at encouraging less vehicles being brought to campus, and yet we offer something that is either free or very, very minimal amount for people to bring whatever, even their vehicles not only, but also many students bring their boats. The other thing I want to bring up is that in addition, it was asked of Mayor Wiesa if this change would allow any licensed vehicle of any kind to park on the street if they had a permit at night, which included motorhomes, semis, boats on a trailer with a license, snowmobiles on a trailer with a license. Keep in mind, nothing would prevent anyone from even living in a motorhome or car parked on the street where parking is permitted. And in these days and difficulties with finances for people, it's not uneasy, it's not unlikely to see this happen. I know of one person personally that has done that with his RV, and I would not like to have that in my neighborhood all the time, every night. Overnight parking in Wausau was brought up last year, that they reported that they had several problems that they were having with their overnight parking during the winter months. We already experienced problems for clearing narrow streets of snow with daytime parking. We've also just narrowed some streets that we just redid just recently over in this area on the other side of College Avenue. That street's become narrow, and I watched as that's all parking on one side as the buses go through there every day to go to the hospital, or Lamer's bus bringing workers to the hospital or to the clinic. Getting these cleared is the only time after 2:30, when it's not allowed to park on the street, that our city streets can really work on this. Even if we're going opposite sides of the street, many of our streets don't have parking on the other side. I do not object to providing a 3-day permit to park on the street overnight for when people come out of town, relatives, friends, or visit. However, if this ordinance revision is approved, it will negatively affect the inner city districts that have narrower roads, that already have an overload of daytime street parking problems, while struggling to maintain their property values within a high concentration of student rentals. I do not believe that it makes sense to voice this major change on the entire city to accommodate the few, or even if it's 100 people who may have accumulated too many vehicles for their residents. If you are to allow this. I see people taking advantage of this very quickly, and having a year pass for sure is even more so, where you're going to have $200 for a year is cheap. So we're only increasing the number of people that will bring cars to this city that don't need to bring them, or more rental properties to not have the right amount of space for the number of people they're renting to. And yes, that's what we are doing with our new one. And I've worried about this already, and we're going to continue doing this. We've already had problems in our inner city district neighborhoods. Please don't make them where those of us that have stayed and tried to fight to keep them valuable go further down the drain. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. We do have a number of people who wish to speak in the public, so I am going to ask that we try to limit our comments to 3 minutes. Any other committee members who wish to speak, please unmute and introduce yourself. I see no other committee member. Sorry, go ahead.
My name is Lisa Peters. Denise Birnbaum would also like to speak. Your volume, I'm lost.
Okay, hang on a second. I see that Alder Slowinski, he has a comment. We will start with Alder Slowinski and then we'll move to other public members. But I do notice that whoever was just speaking, we cannot you're cutting out. But go ahead, Alder Slowinski.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I've been pretty quiet on this issue. My district as a whole, obviously I'm in the kind of the outskirts on the east side of town here where our lots are a little bigger, so there's a lot more room to park within the property. But I have been contacted by an individual that lives on 4th Avenue. He had contacted me yesterday, and his concern was it wasn't really about the parking, but he lives in a 3-unit building. I don't know exactly if this is an apartment building or if this is a single family that was converted to apartments. But he lives in a 3-unit building, and the driveway is only there's enough room for only 2 vehicles, or 2.5 vehicles. He has a pickup truck, and he had parked his truck in the driveway, and the rear part of the truck had encroached upon the sidewalk, and he received a ticket from the parking enforcement. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is we do have certain residents or certain properties within the city that just simply don't have the room on the property to park. I completely agree with Alder Nabel and her concerns, but I do like the suggestion that Alder Kneebone has presented, where we could possibly offer no-cost yearly overnight parking passes to be issued per dwelling unit. And I don't know if the discussion, if it would be no cost or if there would be a fee of some sort. I guess that can be determined. But again, I do feel bad for some of these people that live within the downtown area and the older parts of the city where the lots are so small. And, and again, I do agree that I did have one situation in my district where it was pretty much self-imposed. They had a camper, they have all kinds of equipment, and they were parking on the street. I completely understand that. That should not be allowed. So, again, that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other alders who wish to speak? I see Committee Member Leek wishes to speak. Please go ahead. Followed by Alder Zaros.
Yeah, Alder Leek here. That's how you, no, wait, I did it again. Get rid of that hand. Anyway, I was just going to say it must be possible to, write into the ordinance that RVs are forbidden or prohibited from overnight parking. I think in my neighborhood there is similar situation to what Alder Slavinsky was talking about, which is that occasionally, at least I know from my house at least, one car garage, one driveway. My daughter is 16, so it's not always easy to get by on one car. There's space. I can see space for this. And it seems to me that the ordinance could be written in such a way as to be plausible, or to be to at least written in a way that's not compromising, but a compromise ordinance. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Alder Zarazua.
Thank you, Chair. Alder Zarazua, District 4. So a lot of things were already brought up. My district has a huge portion of old homes, small lots. I think, yes, for a traditional like two adult family, we'd have plenty of room, but a lot of people don't live that way. I think we're not looking at the different cultures that we have in our community, that traditionally they might have several generations living in one household who might be driving, and assuming that every person can, first of all, afford to just add on to their driveway, or second, that they, I just lost my train of thought. I just think it's assuming that people can afford that is really elitist. I mean, we can't assume that everyone can just pay to add on to their property, or that there's even space. I do think that there's a lot of room to make this work better for the different parts of the city. I understand from an enforcement point of view, it's probably easiest if the entire city had the same ordinance, but I think understanding our downtown area is different, and understanding our university area is different. There is a possibility of looking at, what does overnight parking look like in those areas of town versus the other spots. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other alders who wish to speak? Mayor Wiesa, you're not an alder, but Mayor.
Not anymore, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. To address some of the comments in regards to wording the ordinance, if you choose to go that route, we could certainly restrict it to licensed motor vehicles that are licensed to be on the road, which would prevent trailers and snowmobiles and things like that. You could also specifically, as Alder Leek suggested, specifically preclude, if it's not already an ordinance, from living on the road. I'm sure Logan could craft a document that would prohibit the use of RVs or motorhomes for an extended period of time as well, if that was the wish of this committee. I just want it to be clear that if you wanted to do something, there are some options available that we wouldn't necessarily need to allow a free-for-all.
Any other alders before we move to the general public? President Johnson.
Alder Shore had his hand up for a longer period of time, so after he's done speaking, I'll take advantage of the time.
Thank you. Alder Shore.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to connect this discussion to other discussions that we've had when we have talked about wanting to limit the width of parking driveways. When we've had enforcement issues with parking on lawns, because I do think that the issues are closely related. And, I'd rather, with these small lots and these, precious acres, I'd rather see lawns, gardens, even, accessory dwellings, which is an issue we'll be discussing. So, maybe in a way, I'm making that point similar to what Director Konoski was saying about our overall objective of going for density. So that's one thing. And then the only other comment that I wanted to make was about the narrowing of streets. Acting Chief Zenner mentioned it, and my understanding is a little different. from everything that I've read, when streets are narrowed, which, you know, many of them would be, then they tend to actually be safer and have fewer problems because, you know, with that narrower space, drivers see that and are more careful. They slow down. So I just wanted to make those points. I have been in favor of relaxing overnight parking for a long time, so this isn't a new position for me. In the past, I have been in the minority, and we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you, President Johnson.
Thank you. So a couple of things. I tend to follow what Director Karnowski was saying. We've been very much focused on urban infill because we know the biggest bang for our proverbial buck is by doing that, right? We know that our biggest density of taxes per acre is, I believe District 3 is the biggest, if I remember correctly, maybe District 1, followed by District 9. I'm trying to remember some of those, but basically our urban core per acre, that's the biggest bang for our buck. That's where we're making the most money. And that's where we are all paying the most per acre in taxes. So when we start hearing from Director Badoon about the cost and Comptroller Treasurer Laddick about the cost of providing parking on streets in our urban core, I don't know that we've necessarily compared it to the apples of the cost of providing infrastructure to our suburban areas, extending sewer and water, extending roadways, keeping track of all of that pavement and managing it and replacing it and plowing it. So do not tell me that just by looking at the cost of urban parking that we haven't looked at the cost of the externalized cost of spreading out beyond our borders in urban sprawl. So I have supported on-street parking. I've experienced it myself. We had 3 cars at one time when my granddaughter was still living at home. Now she's, of course, off, all grown up, with one of my cars. And so it's not that you accumulate cars. Families have needs. And if we're going to have urban infill, it would seem we need to find a way to provide parking that is in addition to on the property. We're already paying those taxes. So let's figure out how to use our streets appropriately with the right kind of restrictions so we don't unnecessarily diminish the quality of neighborhoods or hamper people living there. Thanks.
Alderman Abel, we have members of the public who have been patiently waiting, and since you have already spoken, do you mind if we move to the public?
May I just make a comment? I know that you and others, and there were at least 10 people that sent in letters of the public that are against this proposal, and I haven't heard them being read or brought forward yet either.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've received, just so everyone knows, I've received more emails about this issue than any issue I've had in 3.5 years as alder. For the public, we will move to you, and I can't see very many people. Perhaps the mayor can help, but you're going to have to unmute, introduce yourself, and we'll try to navigate this.
So you have a lady who's on a Moto G7 phone?
That it would be me, Lisa Peters.
Thank you.
Yes, Nancy and Joe Rappi, and we each would like to speak.
Okay, let's go one at a time, if you would permit me, Chair. We'll start with, and I already forgot your name, I apologize, the Moto G7?
Lisa Peters.
And then the rest
and I actually live at 3308 Dixon Street that Mary Kneebone has been discussing.
And I wanted to explain to you some of the issues that we are having here. And I have been a tenant here for quite some time. And this is only an issue that has come up this year as far as the parking goes. For the last 10 years, it has not been an issue as the parking on the side of the street. But since it is now, I wanted to explain some of the issues that we're having here. My landlord, John, I literally had to plow the yard up all the way to our doorsteps so we could park on the lawn last year. Because of it in the wintertime, because of the issue of the parking. Because we do a lot of our parking area here is very small in the back, and a lot of us have 2 vehicles. So only one can fit in the garage, but if you park the other ones out behind the garages, there's no room for the landlord to even plow or people to back out to get out of them. There is no room. So that's why we had an issue of where we had people parking on the side of our thing. It's actually a gravel area that goes off the road that we were parking. But now we are not allowed to park there because of the city ordinance. And that's what we're having the problem with, because before the landlord was actually plowing that area off the road there for us to park, because that's where we had been parking for a long time. So that's why I'm trying to figure out why it has changed so much this year.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. I'm just wondering if either Alder Kneebone or Director Konoski could answer. I'm curious why an issue that could have been resolved through staff at this particular location wasn't dealt with through staff. Why are we introducing an ordinance to change the entire city because of this one situation? Could anyone answer that for me real quick?
The issue is that you cannot make you can't create a parking space in the city right of way. The landlord was perfectly willing to gravel the area right by the street and make a parking space, an approved parking space, but it's in the city right of way. And the city right of way, because of the way the lot is, the only way that they can add parking is to cut down 2 trees and pave the front yard, which is exactly what we don't want to happen. Director Karnowski has worked, and Adam Kuhn has worked with Mr. Hastings for several months now, trying to find a way through engineering what little available green space there is to allow for more parking. And the lot, because of the way it was constructed, Director Karnowski might know how old it is, or Mr. Hastings I see is on, he is the property owner. He may be able to say when it was built, but it's an older building with 6 units. There are 6 one-car garages, a small little paved parking area in the back for cars to back in and out of the garages, then a front yard, half of which is city right-of-way. The other half of which is green space and 2 very large old trees. So they don't have any options at this point. So, and they're not the only ones. This is not a one property issue. There are people all over the city in the urban core, as we've been saying, that have issues when their kids get old enough to have an extra car. We're already paying property taxes. We're already providing services. It's only a matter of changing schedules. And there are going to be streets that aren't going to qualify because of the width or whatever. And I'm getting a little off track. I'll let Director Karnowski add anything to that question you asked.
I think that covers it. In the interest of time, let's keep moving. I know that Nancy and Joe Rapi are next. Please go ahead.
There we go.
Okay, Nancy Rapi, 925 Smith Street. I'm fiercely opposed to these overnight parking changes. I sent each of you a detailed email outlining the many valid arguments against this proposal, and I hope you took the time to read it. But judging from some of the comments I've heard already, I don't think you did. And I don't think you looked at the pictures of cars covered in snow from vehicles that moved nowhere after Wausau had their overnight parking allowed. If you implement these flawed changes without taking these concerns into account, without taking seriously the objections of the street and police departments, expect a barrage of complaints. As Alder Jennings stated, this is the 6th time this is being discussed, and it previously failed for good reasons. It's dirty pool and patently unfair that it's coming before this committee for another kick at the can. We don't need to be considering this yet again, but evidently committee shopping is the reality of where we are. We pay you to enact sensible ordinances and to enforce them, not to feel sorry for people who cry and complain when they're cited and then let them off the hook. It's not your job to make up for the lack of planning and short-sightedness of landlords who have more tenants than available parking. It's expensive to pay for on-site parking, so of course landlords prefer to push that expense onto the backs of the taxpayers. If a landlord provides an on-site parking space, they have to pay to maintain it and plow it. If that parking is pushed out onto the street, we the taxpayers pick up those costs. The landlords reap the benefits and the taxpayers are left holding the bag. We do not have to help these poor landlords solve a problem of their own making. It is not the responsibility of the taxpayers to bail out landlords. Putting cars out on the street overnight only makes them more available for vandalism and better enables break-ins. Thieves no longer need to trespass on private property to steal when vulnerable on-street vehicles are readily available. Cars endlessly parked on the street overnight become easy pickings, and it makes it less likely that motion-activated security lights or security cameras will be triggered when break-ins occur. But car alarms will surely be blaring in the wee hours, and late-night parkers will be honking their horns when they lock their cars. And please tell me how it's decided which tenant or tenants draw the short straws and are the ones forced to park on the street. I've witnessed tenant bullying at the student rental next door. There is ample room to park 4 cars in the driveway, yet one poor bastard got pushed out onto the street. Either the other 3 were too mean or too lazy to pull their cars up, or the low man on the totem pole wasn't assertive enough to demand they do so. The last guy couldn't get in the driveway and his car was ticketed. Allow this proposal to move forward and you take the burden off the backs of landlords and you put it on the backs of the street department, the police department, and the taxpayers. Simply put, that stinks. And I would like to respond to that elitist remark. It is not elitist to ask the committee to help us out in the 1st District. We have, if you read my letter, you will know all the problems that we put up with every single day. It is not elitist to tell people that if you don't have a place to park a vehicle, you either don't get a vehicle or you find some other accommodation for yourself. You don't require your neighbors to take care of your problem. What about, we're constantly hearing about personal responsibility.
Nancy,
Maybe,
I'm sorry to interrupt. We need
okay.
to. Thank you very much. Your point is made. We understand. Mr. Oppie, go ahead, please.
Okay, when this proposal came before the Public Works Committee, we were told one of the reasons was to help out a family with a teenager who wanted his own car but didn't have anywhere to park it on his parents' property. Seems like an innocent request, but satisfying the temporary whims of 1 or 2 teenagers by opening free or extremely low-cost overnight parking to the entire city brings unintended consequences. Here are a couple of examples of what these proposed changes will ultimately result in. First, enabling an existing horde on Maria Drive to grow and flourish, coincidentally right next to a high school. Right now, this horde has spilled onto the driveway. The owner is still able to park 2 cars at the end of the driveway if you don't count the one partially covered by the horde. Allow free or low-cost overnight street parking, and it frees up that driveway space for the horde to expand. All the hoarder has to do is get a few more free tarps from Harbor Freight. He's in business. Now look at the other side of this house. There's a van parked on the lawn with boats on top. That will inevitably end up out on the street too. Secondly, we sent some pictures to Alder Jennings showing vehicles and trailers parked out on Buchholz Avenue. There's a construction trailer, a work truck, a trailer, a snowmobile trailer, and a passenger vehicle. If you allow free or low-cost overnight parking, street parking, you will codify these vehicles to stay right where they are. It is unrealistic to think movement from the odd side to the even side is ever going to take place. A construction trailer isn't a motorized vehicle, but if it's hitched to a work truck, does it automatically become legally parked? Does the same apply to a camper or fifth wheel, snowmobile trailer, pontoon boat, or jet ski? These are questions yet to be addressed. What will be done to deal with people living out of their cars when they are evicted by the same landlords you're in such a hurry to help out? How many individuals and families are already under threat of eviction due to job loss, due to an end to extended unemployment compensation, and with eviction moratoriums ending? Free overnight street parking will facilitate a new version of Hooverville, but maybe that's by design. Free or extremely low-cost overnight parking enables and encourages behavior we want to avoid. Don't make the mistake of being convinced otherwise. Shoot down this proposal for the final time.
Thank you for your comments. We will move on. I'm going to start setting a timer. And I ask everyone to please keep your comments to less than 3 minutes or less, please. And if somebody else already made your point, just please make that comment and not repeat it again. It looks like, is it Denise? You're muted.
Unmute. Okay, this is going to be different. She took care of her bullet points, and what I'm going to do, and I have to turn my phone around so you can see the property. So I'm taking you into our back parking lot. You'll see that we have a 6-unit garage thing. We have people with 2 vehicles here. And so this is kind of the mess we have back here, which creates a problem with the plowing in the wintertime. And we have a backyard back here, but we don't get to really use it as a backyard because vehicle to be parked here. And so it is quite crowded. And going back out to the front, I can show you where he would have to cut down a tree and put in pavement or something. And that also creates an issue. It's a very large tree, very old. And he has some stakes out here. See, this is why we got all this stuff in the front yard, because we don't have a backyard. All this area would be gone. The people living here, their area of the front yard would be parking. He's got this marked for cutting down this beautiful tree. My granddaughter, she does her chalk artwork for grandma here, but there would be cars parked here. Mr. Hastings just paid for having all this, the pebbles and the pavers and everything, and we've beautified the front yard. And yeah, I would not eat. This is my porch here, and sitting on my porch, this is what I see.
Okay.
We have cars parked right here. And so I just wanted to give you a visual on this. And Mr. Hastings can answer any questions with regards to the building. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your comments. I think we understand thanks for those visuals. I think we understand the issue with the building. Are there any other comments from the public that have not been stated so far? Alders are.
I have a letter from Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington. He's sharing his views as a resident, not representing any group. He says, thank you for continuing the parking management discussion. I've read through Alder Kneebone's request and the staff memo in the packet and have great concern that there's a misunderstanding on how critical it is to charge market rates for overnight parking, such as car storage, in order to manage demand and pay for the streets themselves. Free parking combined with parking requirements in the zoning code have been a detriment to our entire community. These two culprits together have caused the massive excess parking supply downtown that's more than 50% vacant most days of the year, the over-reliance on driving for short trips like going half a mile to a mile to get groceries, blight on Division, downtown, South Side, and Highway 10 East, and the desire to use TIFs to spur development. Plus, it was very evident from the last Finance Committee meeting I attended that the city is greatly struggling to pay for its roads. It seems apparent that the current and past year's tax rolls haven't afforded the proper schedule of road maintenance, and thus parking fees should be going toward road maintenance and the staff time involved. To remove or lower the overnight parking fees is not fiscally responsible. However, could a compromise be reached that uses a market infrastructure cost rate instead of the very low rate that staff recommended in the memo? In summary, I hope staff and public officials can agree that overnight parking needs to be priced correctly and can't become free. Thank you for your time. Again, Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public that have not been stated before we bring it back to the committee?
Bob Weir. Got me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Bob Weir again, 727 2nd Street. You know, this thing keeps bouncing around. Unfortunately, there are several silos on the council, and it occurs at staff also, where you know, a couple of members or a couple of individuals get together and they form a majority, and then we bounce the issue back again to another committee or whatever the case may be. This entire thing of on-street parking needs to be addressed by staff and the council. If they're not happy with this, with the staff recommendation, then come up with some reasonable alternatives rather than saying, no, we don't like that, do it again. We're not even considering the bike paths as an example. I live on 2nd Street. There's no parking on the west side of 2nd Street. The east side of 2nd Street is, I believe, the side where the bike path is going to go. That's going to be no parking. And you know, we're not addressing all the issues to be considered. If a property owner has property that's properly zoned for two-family, as an example, and can make a case for it, then go to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for a variance.
Exactly.
But you have to make a case for it. It's not just the way that some committees happen to operate, where, oh gee, I feel sorry for you. Okay, but we really can't do. The Zoning Board of Appeals can do it, and possibly in the rewrite of Chapter 23, staff can address these issues. Yeah, it doesn't look good for a double wide driveway leading to a single stall garage, but that may in fact be the resolution to some of these problems. And then a single family home could have three vehicles, 2 on the driveway and 1 inside the garage. I mean, when I purchased my house, I had a single car garage, little one, like size for a Model A probably. And my son was attending the university and working at night. And I was working my normal work also. And it was a pain in the ass to, excuse me. It was a pain to have to move my son's car out of the driveway and to be able to get my car out.
Mr. Ware, could you please summarize your comments?
Okay, so I'll summarize. So basically what I'm saying is that look at when they rewrite chapter 23, have staff look at the parking issue and resolve the parking, you know, come up with something reasonable. But one size doesn't fit all, and to make a change just because of 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 families that's going to affect the entire city does not make sense.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the public that have not been stated?
Alder Cindy Nabel, District 3. I just want to state that this is where I also believe that, yes, having maybe a variance for individually is not something that's going to fit everybody, but that would be the best solution. And I have a 1-car garage with not a double wide driveway, and I had 2 children, and we have 2 cars, and we have to jockey our cars, and our kids didn't have their own car. That's beside the point. People live with within their means and what they have, or you don't live there. I mean, you find other solutions, or you get a different parking spot, but it shouldn't be the city changes everything for and I'm not just saying it's a couple, I know there's a lot, but the people that have written into you are people that are in this area that all agreed they did not want to see all night street parking, and especially not for the low cost and not free. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public, please? Following up to an earlier comment made by Alder Nabel, last I looked, I had 13 letters from constituents all in opposition to this. So I'd like to bring it back to the committee. What are your wishes, please?
I would like to make some comments. If I want to pay $3 a night, I can park my RV on the street every night of the week, every night of the year. If I have enough money to pay that $3, there's nothing to stop me from getting a permit. There's nothing to stop me from parking my car or my trailer attached to the car if I have a permit. So to say that this is going to stop, that this is going to expand all of that, I think is a little disingenuous. I think if people want to park their RVs, they're going to buy a permit just like everybody else. Could we not, given the economic situation, the uncertainty of people's employment, could we not do for the residents of this city what we have done for the small business owners and the bar owners and put a moratorium on parking tickets while we have a chance to allow staff to work together to figure out an answer that works for the city? To continue to force people, to penalize people that already pay property taxes through no fault of their own, can't park on their property. It's not right. This discussion is not going to end tonight. It's not going to end another year from now, as Director Karnowski said. The more we infill and the more we start adding density, the more and more these problems are going to come to the fore. So if I can make a motion, I would like to move to put a moratorium on parking tickets until October 1st, September 1st, to coincide with the grandfathering of the outdoor, the alcohol consumption downtown. That's the least we can do. It gives people time to look for options, and it gives staff time to figure out an equitable way to address unique situations within the city.
I would like to respond to that comment and say there's no reason that an individual cannot.
Hang on, Alderman Nabel.
Thank
That was a motion. I'm not sure how directly it relates to the agenda item itself. However, a motion has been made, so I need to know if there's a second. And Alder Kneebone, if I understand you correctly, you're asking for a moratorium of payment of fees for parking violations. And perhaps at some point you can add where that money is going to come from, but that's the motion. Do we have a second?
If
Again, the motion, Alder Kneebone, if you'd like to repeat it.
my intention is to not necessarily to suspend parking tickets, but to suspend the need for a parking permit. I suppose that's the same thing in effect.
If I may paraphrase Alder Kneebone, if I get the gist of what you're trying to do, your motion would be to rescind the overnight parking restrictions through whatever date you choose. You mentioned October 1st, but it would rescinding overnight parking restrictions, I believe, is what you're shooting for.
Yes, that's actually the goal. And that would allow some relief to residents while staff has time to look at this and make some recommendations that make sense for the whole city. So it's just buying a little bit of time, giving people relief. We have stopped charging fares for transit during the coronavirus. We've allowed restaurants we've allowed alcohol to be carried around downtown. We've allowed a number of things during this unique time. I think this is only fair. So I'll be quiet.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Seeing none, the motion fails. Bringing it back to the committee, what are your wishes regarding agenda item number 3?
Alder Nabel, here I would like this to be brought up as that that if somebody has a parking need, they come forward to get a special, I can't even think of the word now, that Bob Ware said earlier.
Alder, and again, if I get to your gist, you are looking to refer things to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I would caution against doing that because you don't need a motion to do it, first of all. They can certainly do that right now without any action. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, Mr. Ware's comments were not 100% accurate in the fact that that's not always going to be granted or not always an option, nor should the Zoning Board of Appeals work on specifically site parking in most cases. And if the chair will permit, I want to explain that a little bit because some of the changes that were made, including more stringent enforcement, the hiring of the CSOs, restrictions on extending the parking lots and the materials that are used for parking lots, the fact that it's now not allowed in the front of the building, those changes came because of actions through the council. May not be everyone on this council, but councils preceding this made those restrictions. So it's not something necessarily that can always be handled internally at staff. The ordinances that are in place restrict the use and the policies that the council set forth in regards to parking enforcement, for example, have really kind of created that. And Director Konoski alluded to that. When the council makes a decision, it will sometimes have a ripple effect. So we need to be very careful in what we do. But I would strongly encourage you to not direct things to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That is currently allowed. It is certainly acceptable if it's the council's or this committee's wish, rather, to not make any changes. No action is completely appropriate.
Okay, then I would like to state that a lot of people don't know that they could ask for an appeal on that. And that was why I was stating this. So that being said, that is an option for people. I would say that we should not change the overnight street parking.
Alder Jennings, I'd like to respond to Alder Nabel. That actually was looked at in this case, and it does not apply. A couple of months ago.
Alder Kanofsky, or sorry, Director.
Yeah, just to address the Zoning Board of Appeals process. First and foremost, in order to apply for a Zoning Board of Appeal variance, it's a $300 fee. It does require a public hearing and does go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. So if we talk about financial hardships and things of that nature, that's something that we should take into consideration as well. There are 3 principles of the Zoning Board of Appeal, and when you apply for a variance, one of them is practical difficulty or an unnecessary hardship, unique property limitations, and then, of course, protection of public interest. If you have a 50 by 150 lot and the entire subdivision, the entire neighborhood is 50 feet by 150 feet, do you really have a unique property limitation? If you don't meet one of those, or if you don't meet all 3 of those requirements, typically staff advises an applicant not to pursue a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Staff really directs applicants whether or not they should pursue something like that, whether or not staff would support it. Given the parking conversation, a lot of times when people come to us seeking variances from our impervious surface or parking requirements, staff works as hard as we can to find alternatives instead of taking it to the Zoning Board of Appeals, just to save that cost, to save that time and energy, because a lot of times we can find alternatives. In Mr. Hastings' example on Dixon Street, it's very hard for us to find alternatives in that specific scenario, and that's why I brought it back and said to Alder Kneebone, maybe this is something that we should further explore, because this isn't the only time we've run into this issue in the city. And yes, it may impact a small number of people, but there might, again, as I said, as the policy decisions we make in the long run will have a greater impact on our neighborhoods and on street parking. So we've talked a lot about Zoning Board of Appeals. I just want to verify that this body knows the process of the Zoning Board of Appeals and those 3 pillars of being able to be granted a variance.
Thank you very much. So we have heard lots of different perspectives on this. And if no one from the committee has a specific motion, I would recommend that we take no action and send it back to staff to do the job that they were asked to do before. But there have been lots of things that have limited their ability to do that, and come back to committee and then ultimately council with a recommendation. But does anyone have a motion related to overnight street parking? Or do you prefer to take no action and send it back to staff?
Alder Nabel, it looks like you're trying to say something, but you were on mute.
I still would like to vote against the overnight street parking changes.
There needs to be a motion.
Yeah, there's no motion on the floor. There's
That's
nothing.
what my motion is. I move to not approve the overnight parking changes.
Alderperson, we don't have a recommended ordinance change. There is nothing to approve or deny at this point.
Then what are we voting on?
Nothing.
We're not.
Okay.
We're not. My motion failed for lack of second, so we move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
If no one has a motion, we're going to take no action and send this back to staff. Is that the wishes of the committee?
Yes.
Yes.
I would just comment, I think this merits further discussion, but we don't have anything specific enough to discuss right now. This is a complicated issue, and whatever ordinance needs to come up is going to have to be very, specifically tailored and very well thought out. And it's going to be a compromise situation no matter what, if anything happens at all. So, I mean, right now we don't have anything anywhere near that specific. So, yeah, I think we need to just sit on this a bit.
Chair Jennings, you're muted as well.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. So, Chair Jennings, just a question for you. Are you asking that staff come up with a proposal when you say directing it back to staff?
I think following Alder Leek's comments and comments that we've already previously had about this, that staff, the different departments need to come together and figure out how they want to resolve the parking issue. And once they do that, come back to committee and then common council with their recommendation. But given the complexity of this and the competing interests between departments, I think it falls to them to resolve their differences and figure out their recommendation that serves the city the best. Is that okay?
Yes, that is. But we also, if you recall, President Jennings, or I'm sorry, Chair Jennings, there was a motion, and I forget the date, I apologize. I included it in my email to you, directing staff to provide a recommendation for a parking authority. Do you still want to do that? Or does your committee still want to do that?
I guess the confusion that created, sorry to belabor this, is that we are not a city of a size to have a parking authority. We're not able to do that. That was just the term I was using. So if we bracket out that term, I think it's coming up with whatever we want to call this group of staff members that sit together and consider these issues. I don't know if you have a name that you want to apply to this.
We'll just, if it's your wish, Chair, and again, I'm going to paraphrase what I think you're trying to get at. You're directing staff to come up with a recommendation regarding overnight parking.
Thank you.
Is this not what we already have in our papers that we received for August 6th, which says that the Department of Public Works, Police Department, Comptroller, Treasurer, and Director of Community Developments met to discuss overnight parking and came up with differing views to it, and then came up with this following breakdown of the reduction, which doesn't sound like that there was a consensus, but it came up with this is the recommendation already. That's why I thought we were voting whether we are doing this or not.
Okay, thank you. And my understanding is there wasn't consensus reached, but we really have to move on. But Director Konoski, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, between Director Badoon, Chief Center, Comptroller Laddick, and I, we met and discussed this. Yeah, I think just like the City Council, we don't have a true consensus on how we feel about overnight parking. But in order for us to bring something back to this body for consideration, I think that we do need to have a further discussion with this group on what exactly you want us to do. Our more or less recommendation was let's reduce the fees to help address this. And if the answer from this body is, well, that's not the direction we want to go, then what is the direction that this body would like us to take it? And I think that's really where we're at, is what is the direction? Where do you want us to go? And what do you want to start putting together?
Okay, that brings us back to, I asked if there was a motion. There isn't a motion. And so that leaves us with taking no action.
Do you want a motion to return it to staff? I mean,
if there's a motion, then why aren't we saying there's a motion to not change the overnight street parking?
You don't need a motion to not change something.
Okay.
So.
To leave it as is.
So, Chair Jennings, if I may take some liberties again, taking no action by this body means nothing changes. The overnight permit process stays in place at the current fee with the current restrictions. If this body desires a change, then we can have staff work on that. Now, it doesn't have to be the body. If Alder Kneebone, for example, and I apologize for throwing you under the bus there, but if Alder Kneebone has a suggestion, staff can put that suggestion together with that guidance and bring it back to the body to consider. If Alder Nabel has a suggestion, say changing the overnight parking from odd even to every night, whatever that suggestion might be, staff can put that together. If the committee as a whole would like staff to move in a particular direction, for example, finding a way to allow overnight parking, but not lose the revenue generated from those permits. If you direct staff to do that, that's what they will try and do. I don't know that there's a good answer. And we can bring back a recommendation for your committee to consider. But at this point, the staff was asked to put together some ideas. They put together those ideas. It was not in the form of an ordinance amendment. It was something for the body to discuss. If you choose to not do any action or take any action on those discussion items, for example, reducing the fee for overnight parking, then you don't do that. That's fine. You don't take any action, nothing changes. But if you want to see some change, then I would ask that you either contact staff, and it doesn't have to be tonight. If an individual has a change, bring it to staff and we can come up with a proposal for this body to consider. If you don't want any change, then simply don't do anything. And we don't have to make any changes to overnight parking. But that would be the process for any ordinance changes or policy changes citywide, whether they relate to policy or parking or not. Is that clear enough? But we do need some direction. If you're going to refer it back to staff, we want to know why. What do you hope us to achieve?
I have one comment perhaps that will help. I have no problem charging for overnight parking as long as there is a process by which people who live in a unique situation can be exempted from having to pay the fee. That's easy. Keep the fees the way they are. Keep the ordinance the way it is. Just allow an appeal process so people with unique lots can go to some place and get a permit that would allow them to park free. That's really what I think we need. And then you go case by case, and it's not citywide, and you can approve or deny based on case by case. So that would be my recommendation to staff. Leave the fees the way they are if you want to, but let's build in an appeal process for folks that need it.
That sounds like real specific direction. So I think we can, again, we need to move on. Is that specific enough for staff?
Yes, I think that's absolutely appropriate. So we will take that back to staff and we will have staff work on that and bring it back sometime in the future.
Okay, thank you. We have beat this one up. I apologize for the very long meeting. Alderman Abel, I realize you have something else to say, but
I don't.
It's 2 hours now, so.
Nope, I'm done.
All
I
right,
have a
thank
feeling
you.
we beat it up, but it'll get back up again, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So our agenda is exhausted. I appreciate everyone's patience. I realize that this is not resolution and some people will be frustrated, but our agenda is exhausted and we adjourn at 7:58 p.m. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.